Daniel Mercer knew something was wrong the moment he walked into the conference room. The air felt heavy, like the silence before a storm. His lawyer sat at the long glass table, hands folded, eyes fixed on a thick folder. Outside the window, the city moved like it always did, cars honking, people rushing, life continuing without pause. But inside that room, Daniel felt as if time had slowed down. He had received the call only an hour earlier. His lawyer's voice had sounded tense, almost careful. "Daniel, you need to come in right away," he had said. "There are some documents you need to see." Daniel had tried to guess what it could be. Maybe a contract issue, maybe a small legal problem with the company. Nothing serious. After all, the company had been running smoothly for years. Clients were satisfied. Review was steady. His business partner, Lucas Grant, had always handled the financial side with confidence, or so Daniel believed. Now the folder sat on the table between them like a quiet warning. "Go ahead," the lawyer said softly. Daniel opened it. At first, the words made no sense. Legal language filled every page: ownership transfers, asset movements, signatures. He read slowly, trying to connect the details. Then the truth began to sink in. Lucas had created another company. Months ago, a company Daniel had never heard of. Through a series of legal steps buried inside contracts they had signed together, Lucas had quietly moved most of their clients and assets into that new company. Lucas owned that company alone. Daniel stopped reading. The room felt smaller. Suddenly, "Is this real?" he asked quietly. The lawyer nodded. "I'm afraid it is." Daniel forced himself to keep reading. Every page felt like another piece of the same puzzle. Contracts Daniel remembered signing during busy days when both partners were rushing to close deals. Small clauses he had trusted Lucas to handle. Lucas had written those clauses carefully, very carefully, by the time Daniel realized what had happened. The transfer was already complete. The company they built together was no longer theirs. It belonged to Lucas. Daniel leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling for a long moment. 15 years. 15 years of work. Trust and sacrifice had vanished through a few quiet signatures. "Can we fight this?" Daniel asked. The lawyer hesitated before answering. "We could try," he said slowly, "but legally." Lucas covered his tracks well. It would take years in court, and the chances of winning are not strong. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. Lucas had not made a mistake. This was planned, carefully planned. Memories began flooding Daniel's mind. He saw the old garage where everything started. Two young men sitting at a wooden table covered in laptops and coffee cups had believed they could build something big together. Lucas had always been the bold one, the man with the sharp business mind. Daniel had been the builder, the problem solver, the one who created the technology that made their company special. They trusted each other completely, at least. Daniel did. He remembered nights when they worked until sunrise, laughing about their future success. Lucas used to say, "One day we'll look back at this garage and laugh." Daniel believed every word. The lawyer's voice pulled him back to the present. "There's something else," he said. Daniel looked down at another document. It showed the current ownership structure. Daniel's name appeared only in a small corner of the company now. A minor share, almost meaningless. Lucas controlled everything. What about the employees? Daniel asked quietly. "They've already been informed about the new structure," the lawyer said. Daniel blinked. Already informed, that meant Lucas had moved quickly, very quickly. "Do they think I agreed to this?" Daniel asked the lawyer. "Didn't answer right away. That's unclear," he said carefully. Lucas explained it as a business restructuring. Daniel stood up slowly. His legs felt unsteady. But his mind was becoming clearer. Lucas had taken control of the company and presented it as a normal change to the outside world. Nothing looked suspicious. Only Daniel knew the truth. Only Daniel knew he had been pushed out. "Where is he now?" Daniel asked. "His office." Daniel left the building without another word. The sky outside had turned gray with heavy clouds. Rain began falling as he walked to his car. Each drop hit the pavement sharply, matching the rhythm of his racing thoughts. During the drive to the company headquarters, Daniel replayed every conversation he had ever had with Lucas. Had there been signs? Moments he ignored. Lucas had always been ambitious. He wanted growth, expansion, bigger deals. Sometimes he pushed harder than Daniel felt comfortable with, but betrayal. Daniel had never imagined it. The company building appeared ahead, a modern, glass structure they had moved into 5 years earlier after their biggest success. Daniel remembered the day they opened the office. Employees applauded. Lucas had shaken his hand proudly. "We did it," Lucas had said. Now Daniel walked through the same lobby feeling like a stranger. The receptionist looked surprised when she saw him. "Daniel, I didn't know you were coming in today." Daniel nodded politely and headed toward the elevators. People in the hallway greeted him like always. Unaware of what had happened, that made it worse. Lucas's office sat at the end of the top floor corridor. Daniel knocked once before opening the door. "Lucas." Grant sat behind a large desk, reviewing papers. He looked up calmly for a moment. Neither man spoke. Lucas leaned back slightly in his chair. "I wondered when you'd find out." He said. There was no shock in his voice, no apology. Daniel walked slowly to the desk and placed the folder on it. "You planned this," Daniel said. Lucas folded his hands. "Yes." The word landed heavily in the quiet room. Daniel studied Lucas's face, searching for some sign of regret. There was none. "You could have talked to me," Daniel said. Lucas shook his head slightly. "You wouldn't have agreed. That doesn't make this right." Lucas sighed, almost like a teacher explaining a lesson. "Daniel, the company needed faster growth, bigger risks. You were always careful, always thinking small. That works at the beginning, but not forever." Daniel felt anger rising, but he kept his voice steady. "So your solution was to steal it?" Lucas didn't react to the word. "Nothing was stolen," he said calmly. "Everything was done legally." Daniel laughed bitterly. "That's your defense?" Lucas leaned forward slightly. "My defense is that I built this company too," he said. "I brought in investors, clients, opportunities. I made it valuable." Daniel met his gaze. "We built it together." Lucas shrugged. "Maybe once, but things change." The rain outside grew heavier, hitting the windows like distant applause. Daniel felt the weight of every year. They had worked side by side. All those memories now felt fragile. "You destroyed our partnership," Daniel said quietly. Lucas didn't deny it. "Partnerships end all the time," he replied. The casual tone in his voice hurt more than anger would have. Daniel realized something important in that moment. Lucas didn't see himself as the villain. In his mind, he had simply made a smart business move. Daniel looked around the office one last time. The furniture, the awards on the walls, the large company logo behind Lucas's desk, everything they had built together. Now it belonged to someone who had quietly pushed him out. "What happens to me now?" Daniel asked. Lucas answered without hesitation. "You still own a small share. If you want to stay involved, we can find a role for you." Daniel stared at him. "A role?" Lucas nodded. "Something technical." "You were always better with the product side anyway." The words felt like a final insult. Daniel understood. Lucas didn't see him as a partner anymore, just an employee. A very replaceable one. Daniel picked up the folder. "I won't stay," he said. Lucas didn't try to stop him. "Suit yourself," he replied. Daniel turned toward the door. Before leaving, he paused. "You know," he said quietly, "I trusted you." Lucas looked back at his papers. "Trust doesn't run companies," he said. Daniel walked out without another word. The hallway felt longer now. Employees passed by, smiling, unaware that the man who helped build their workplace no longer belonged there. When Daniel reached the elevator, he pressed the button slowly, inside his chest. The anger had changed shape. It wasn't loud anymore. It was quiet, cold, as the elevator doors closed. One clear thought formed in his mind. Lucas believed the story was finished, but Daniel knew something Lucas had forgotten. The man who had built the company's core systems, the man who understood every part of its foundation, had just walked out the door, and somewhere deep inside Daniel's mind, a new idea had begun to grow. Not a burst of anger, not a reckless reaction, something slower, something patient as the elevator descended toward the lobby. Daniel realized the truth. Lucas had taken the company, but he had also created an enemy who now understood exactly how the empire worked, and that thought stayed with Daniel as he stepped outside into the rain. The betrayal was only the beginning. Daniel Mercer disappeared from the industry almost overnight. After the confrontation with Lucas, he packed a few personal items from his office and left the building quietly. No dramatic speech, no public accusations, no arguments in front of employees. To everyone watching from the outside, it looked like a simple business transition. Lucas told people Daniel wanted to take a break and focus on personal projects. Many believed it. A few were confused. But no one knew the truth. For the first few weeks, Daniel stayed inside his small apartment. The silence there felt strange after years of constant meetings, calls, and deadlines. The city outside continued its busy rhythm, but Daniel's life had slowed down completely. At night, he sat by the window, replaying the moment Lucas admitted the betrayal. Each time he remembered it, the words sounded colder. Business is business. Daniel kept asking himself the same question. How long had Lucas been planning this? Months? Maybe even years? The thought made the betrayal feel deeper. It meant Lucas had been smiling, shaking hands, and discussing future plans while secretly preparing to remove him. But anger alone did not drive Daniel. Something else slowly took its place. Focused one evening, he opened his laptop and began studying public records related to the company. Since Lucas now owned it through his new corporation, many documents were visible through legal filings, financial reports, investor presentations, expansion plans. Lucas had grown bold after taking control. Daniel studied everything carefully. The more he looked, the more he understood Lucas's strategy. Lucas wanted rapid growth, bigger clients, larger contracts, and aggressive expansion into new markets. It was risky, but if it worked, the company would become far more powerful than before. Daniel leaned back in his chair one night and stared at the screen. Lucas had gambled everything on speed. That meant weaknesses existed somewhere. Daniel began mapping the company's structure from memory. He knew the technology better than anyone. After all, he had built the first version of the system himself years ago. He understood how the software handled data, how clients relied on certain features, and where the company depended heavily on outside services. Piece by piece, he started to see the fragile parts of Lucas's new empire. Meanwhile, Lucas continued expanding. News articles praised the company's rapid growth. Interviews showed Lucas speaking confidently about innovation and leadership. Every time Daniel saw those headlines, a quiet fire burned in his chest. Lucas had not only taken the company, he had taken the credit for building it. One afternoon, Daniel received an unexpected message from a former client named Maria Torres. She had worked closely with Daniel during the early years of the company. "I heard you left," her message said. "If you ever start something new, let me know." Daniel read the message twice. It reminded him of something important. Lucas might control the company, but trust could not be transferred through contracts. Over the next few weeks, Daniel carefully contacted a few people who respected his work. He never complained about Lucas. He never shared the story of betrayal. Instead, He asked simple questions about future projects and listened closely to their answers. Some people were cautious, others were curious. Slowly, small opportunities began to appear. But even as Daniel explored those possibilities, the idea of revenge remained in his mind. Late one night, he discovered something interesting in a financial report. Lucas's company relied heavily on a massive contract with a global investor group. The deal brought millions of dollars into the company each year. Without it, Lucas's rapid expansion would become impossible. Daniel studied the details carefully. The contract depended on performance, targets, and investor confidence. If the investors believed the company had serious operational risks, they could withdraw their support. Daniel knew exactly how to reveal those risks. He had designed parts of the system years earlier. He knew where certain technical weaknesses still existed, small things that were manageable with careful planning but dangerous under fast expansion. If those details reached the investors in the right way, doubt would spread quickly. Lucas's empire could collapse almost overnight. Daniel sat in his chair thinking about it. The opportunity or revenge had appeared. All he had to do was prepare a report explaining the weaknesses and present it to the investor group. It would look professional, responsible, even helpful. But the effect would be devastating. Lucas would lose funding, the company would shrink, and Lucas would experience the same shock Daniel had felt that rainy morning in the lawyer's office. For several days, Daniel worked quietly on the report. His experience allowed him to explain the risks clearly. Every page looked precise and convincing. Yet something strange happened as the report grew longer. Daniel began remembering the early days. Again, the garage office, the long nights, the excitement when their first clients signed a contract. Those memories made his hands pause on the keyboard. Lucas had betrayed him. Yes, but those years had still been real. The friendship had once existed. Daniel pushed the thought away and continued working. But the conflict inside him was growing. Part of him wanted justice. Another part wondered whether revenge would truly repair what had been broken. Still, the report remained open on his screen, waiting for one final step. All Daniel had to do was send it, and everything Lucas had built would begin to fall apart. Daniel Mercer stared at the glowing screen in front of him late one night. The report was finished. Every detail was organized, every weakness explained clearly. If the document reached Lucas's investors, their confidence would collapse immediately. The company Lucas had taken would begin to crumble. For weeks, Daniel had worked quietly on this plan, building it step by step. Now the final moment had arrived. All he needed to do was press send. Outside his apartment window, the city lights flickered in the distance. Cars moved along the streets far below, their headlights passing like small rivers of light. Daniel leaned back in his chair and rubbed his tired eyes. His mind was racing, but his heart felt strangely heavy. For months, the idea of revenge had felt simple. Lucas had betrayed him, stolen their company, and taken credit for everything they had built together. Justice, Daniel told himself, meant making Lucas feel the same loss. The report in front of him could do exactly that. But something had changed during the long nights of planning. As Daniel read through the report again, memories kept rising in his mind. Not the betrayal, but the earlier years. The garage office, where everything began. It's the excitement of their first successful project. The moment they signed their first major client and celebrated with cheap pizza. Because they couldn't afford anything else, those memories felt real. Honest, for a long time, Lucas had not been an enemy. He had been a partner, even a friend. Daniel closed the laptop slowly. The revenge was ready, but he was no longer certain it would give him the satisfaction he once imagined. The next morning, Daniel woke early and checked his email. A message waited for him from an industry conference organizer. They had heard about Daniel's new independent work and wanted him to present his ideas during an upcoming technology conference. Daniel read the invitation carefully. The same investor group that funded Lucas's company would be attending the conference. The timing felt almost unreal. If Daniel revealed his report during that event, the investors would hear everything at once. Lucas would have no time to prepare. The damage would spread instantly. Daniel accepted the invitation. During the following weeks, he prepared 2 different presentations. One focused on his new business ideas. The other contained the report exposing Lucas's weaknesses. Each night, he stared at both files, unsure which one he would use. The conference day arrived quickly. The large hall buzzed with conversations as professionals from across the industry gathered to share ideas and make deals. Daniel walked through the entrance quietly, noticing familiar faces. Some people greeted him warmly. Others looked surprised to see him after such a long absence as he moved through the crowd. Daniel suddenly noticed Lucas standing near the stage. Lucas looked different than Daniel remembered. His expensive suit remained sharp, but there was tension in his posture. He seemed busy speaking with investors, yet his smile looked forced for the first time. Daniel wondered if Lucas already felt pressure from the risks he had taken. Their eyes met across the room. For a brief moment, neither man moved. Lucas nodded slightly, acknowledging him. Daniel returned the gesture calmly. The past stood silently between them. Soon it was time for Daniel's presentation. He walked toward the stage holding his laptop. Inside were both files, the one that could destroy Lucas's company and the one that simply introduced Daniel's new future as he waited backstage. Daniel felt his heart beating faster. This was the moment. The decision he had imagined for months was finally here. He could reveal everything and watch Lucas lose the empire he had stolen. Or he could walk away from revenge completely. The conference host announced his name. Applause filled the hall as Daniel stepped onto the stage. Bright lights shone above him, and rows of faces looked up with curiosity. Lucas sat among them, watching carefully. Daniel connected his laptop to the screen. For a second, the folder containing both presentations appeared in front of him. His finger hovered above the keyboard. Then he made his choice. Daniel opened the file about his new company. The screen behind him filled with clean slides showing fresh ideas, new technology, and a clear vision for the future. Daniel spoke confidently, explaining how his experience had shaped a smarter, more stable business model. He described solutions to problems many companies faced and outlined a plan for growth that valued trust as much as profit. The audience listened closely. Questions followed. Investors seemed interested. Some nodded in approval as Daniel explained his ideas. Throughout the presentation, Daniel never mentioned Lucas or the old company. When he finished, the hall filled with strong applause. Daniel stepped off the stage feeling lighter than he had in months. Later that afternoon, an investor approached him privately. They were impressed by his vision and offered to support his new company. It was the opportunity Daniel had hoped for, built not on revenge but on his own work. As the conference ended, Lucas approached him quietly near the exit. For a moment, both men stood in silence. "You could have destroyed me today," Lucas said finally. Daniel looked at him calmly. "Double quotes, yes," he replied. Lucas studied his face, perhaps searching for anger or accusation. Instead, he found something else: calm certainty. "Why? Didn't you?" Lucas asked. Daniel thought about the long nights, the finished report, and the moment he had closed the laptop. "Because revenge wouldn't rebuild what I lost," he said. Lucas didn't respond. Daniel nodded politely and walked toward the door outside. The evening air felt cool and peaceful. For the first time since the betrayal, Daniel realized something important. Lucas had taken the company, but Daniel had kept something far more valuable: his integrity, his future, and the freedom to build something new without carrying the weight of revenge. As he stepped into the fading sunlight, Daniel understood the final lesson. Sometimes the strongest revenge is simply moving forward and refusing to let betrayal define who you become.